Welcome to the Brothers and Books Podcast. Read all day Brothers and Books Podcast by Hyatt.
Jordan Peterson says that when you have something to say, silence is a lie. In the same way, when you have something to do or your heart's leading you in a certain direction, inaction is also a lie. Today, I'll be speaking with Matty Williams, an OAM winner, and more recently, someone who was on the ground in Ukraine during the Russian invasion. He'll speak today about his thoughts leading into it and what his motivations were to do what he has done, what it was like prior to the invasion, during the invasion itself, including seeing one of the first cruise missiles fly overhead as Russia stepped over the Ukrainian border, and finally, what sort of actions he needed to take to escape, and then also some of the people that he met along the way, including now refugees of war that have scattered across Europe in an attempt to flee from Vladimir Putin's invasion. I'm Dylan Conway. This is the Brothers and Books podcast, and thank you for being a part of the world's coolest book club. Make sure you watch till the end of this video where Willie talks about what he has learnt from his travels and also his advice for how to live a good life and do what you say you are going to do and find adventure even in a world full of restrictions and isolation. I hope you enjoy this podcast like I did, and thank you very much for joining me again. Make sure you like and subscribe if you like the videos below, and I'll see you over on Brothers and Books Instagram. Cheers, guys. Matthew Williams, OAM, welcome to the Brothers and Books podcast, mate, and welcome back to Australia. How you been?
I'm good, man. Finally here, sitting down with you. It's been in the planning for, a couple of months now. And me being like, you got to have me on. And you being like, no shit. So,
well, I've been supporting you. Every time you message me, like, I'm coming on the podcast, you've been drunk. So I didn't know how true to your word you were, mate. But, you got to have a few beers when you're in a bloody war zone.
That's pretty good odds. Anytime I message you, I'm drunk. That's getting the case for most people.
There you go, buddy. If you're messaging Willie beating cancer on Instagram and he responds, he's drunk.
I'm either drunk or getting shot at, or a mixture of both.
Now, mate, you've been running all over Europe, moving from, I would assume, east to west across Ukraine.
Yeah.
You've been pretty tired. How are you feeling now? You rested up since you've been back in Oz? I haven't given you much time to bloody sleep in between this interview, mate.
No, I'm tired, man. Like, I just fucking did not recover. So it's been, been back 4 or 5 days. So I'm still a bit jet lagged, still a bit of a cough. Like, I'm bloody COVID negative, but which I was surprised when they're like, you're negative. I'm like, fucking sure.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
Like, okay. And I got tested twice, and it's like, it must just be tired, just fatigued.
Yeah, mate.
But I'm feeling a lot better today. Like, I got out, did some exercise this morning, just to try and get over that hump. But yeah, just getting back into it and then just planning, I guess, what comes next, to keep the ball rolling.
Yeah, man. Well, yeah, I really, you say keep the ball rolling, and we'll get into it later, but you always seem to be having big life events. But I was just interested yesterday, we had a conversation about, coming back to Australia on, essentially a deployment. Obviously, the length isn't as long, you don't have the military equipment, and you're by yourself, so you're responsible for yourself completely. But just by yourself in that decompression, we'll probably talk about it later, but, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm good, man. Like, it's just a lot. And we spoke about this yesterday, but for those who weren't, listening into the private phone call.
It's just ASIO.
So just the 2 ASIO agents. But yeah, it was a weird thing. Like the deployment I'd done previously, you come back and sort of, you're away longer and whatever, but you're with the guys there, and then you come home with the guys, and you sort of all go through a slight decompression phase. And it doesn't matter what sort of tour it was, even if you just went holidaying for 9 months. You would have, some level of sort of acclimatization back into reality. But the problem was this time, I think it was so just me. Like, as far as I'm aware, myself and Bryce are the last Westerners to be in at least 3 cities ever in Ukraine. And then, we parted ways as we had different goals and whatever. So, but yeah, a lot of it, that solo-ness of it, you sort of come back and you're like, oh, no one really, like, people saw it, and I think had got a good insight through like my videos and whatever, what was going on. But you come back and you're like, oh shit, like that was a complete solo trip. And it's tiring because everything is on you. Like, from where you eat, sleep, piss, and film and edit and everything, like you'd just die if you didn't do anything. So it's so like you driven, that it's just, you get back and you're like, holy shit, like this is weird to get back to just so normal. Because like 7 weeks I was there, I think the normal became what it sort of was at that time. It wasn't, if you're walking down the street and hear an air raid siren, you just don't bother anymore after that. So it became, that was sort of becoming a normal. And then I came back in Australia in general is like super fucking normal, even compared to like
man.
else.
Yeah, bro. We're not looking outwards, mate. We're looking inwards. We've got the election coming up this year.
We're a nanny state as is. And you get in and I have to wear a seatbelt here. Like, oh, okay. But yeah.
Well, mate, we'll probably get more into that later on. And yeah, you even went to a bloody wedding like first day back, and you've been on Tucker Carlson. I saw your pretty face on Tucker Carlson, and I'm ashamed to admit that Tucker Carlson holds my attention with the way that he speaks. And then all of a sudden, I see my good mate on Tucker Carlson. I almost bloody fell off my chair. So I'm sure you've been fielding a lot of questions. So I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today, because I'm sure you've been answering so many questions. But let's start with, mate, your motivations to go to Ukraine. Now, you and I have spoken for about a year now, just online, and you did tell me during the COVID pandemic. Now, if you're not tracking Matty Williams' story, check out Willy beating cancer over at his YouTube video, and he's got a range of videos dating back to when he left the army, when he was diagnosed with brain cancer. Right? You never talk about it because you're a jovial bastard, but he also, through his raising awareness and also fundraising for the campaign for other people that also suffer with the disease, Matty was awarded an OAM. So I should be calling him Your Honourable, but if I don't say sir or whatever on this, don't hold it against me, Matty. So 6 months ago you said, mate, I just want to get out of Australia. This is bullshit. All of these quarantine laws, and not with COVID, but not being able to do what you wanted to do. And you said that you wanted to somehow pick up journalism. So do you want to take us through like your thoughts? Because you obviously set your mind to a goal, and now you've obviously done it, and to an extraordinary extent as well. So you just want to take us through that.
Yeah, it was difficult. Like I have traveled previously a couple of times, 3 times, I guess, in length, and it was difficult during the COVID pandemic, and I understand restrictions, I understand whatever, but not being able to leave even to countries that would accept you was very difficult. And I think especially difficult maybe in my position where I do work on a time frame with my health, because it was like, well, I may not get the chance further on if this keeps going year on year on year. And when I left the Defence Force, about 15 months ago now, whatever it was, maybe a bit shorter than that, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I sort of came across to, well, I enjoy making content. I think I've got a fairly good stance of being sort of apolitical on something and being able to talk to people. And like I basically over a couple of months came up with that I want to do like media, and I want to do like conflict media, because that's what I think is the pinnacle, in my belief, is the pinnacle of like stories and hard-hitting good content. Like I think 99.9% of journalism now is like that meme where it's like an old war journalist, like, I'm going to the end of the world. And journalists today, it's like, oh, someone donated $4.20 to a charity I don't like. Let's write a story. And I think like every time someone's like, oh, you're a journalist, I'm like, no. I'm just a dude who has the ability to film what he sees. And I think we're seeing a shift in that at the moment with this war, that anyone with an iPhone at any point in time can be the most relevant journalist in the world. In my belief, creating media like this is not hard. You just have to show what's happening. And this is what the mainstream aren't doing, is just showing what they are seeing. Or maybe being prepared to do that because they'll cop backlash. But that's what I wanted to do. I was like, I just want to go and film and do whatever. And one of the things I'm most proud of in myself, and this is, fairly selfish, but I'm very proud of, talking the talk and then actually being committed to walking the walk. There's a lot of people that want to do something, and, I have no qualifications in media journalism, none of it, like nothing. So of course I can't get a job with any media company because I don't know who the fuck I am. Well, I'm not anything. So I was like, well, I'm just going to do it. Like, I'm just going to start and where can I go? And it was, I had a list of, like your Iraq, Afghans, whatever. And it was like, well, Ukraine, 7 weeks ago, I was like, well, Ukraine, is, sort of popping off at the moment, well, that'll be the place that I'll go. It's easier to get into than places like Iraq at the moment. So I was like, and it was just, I have to go. Like, and this isn't like, you can only prepare so much. And I probably underprepared to shit because I'm just like, I survived. And it was like, well, at some point you just have to rock and roll, suck it up, and start, and that first step, and then from there things will. And I said this to a mate yesterday. Things will be okay. Like when you, especially with traveling, 99% of people in the world are good people. You will be okay. You go into a city like Kiev or something like that, like out of wartime. People, you ever speak a different language, and the customs and traditions and whatever are different. Everything's different, but they still mean well. Like 99% of people do not mean you harm. Like it's just I
completely
who's
agree.
this random dude? Agree. So it's scary, but it's probably not as scary. It's probably more scary than it should be. But yeah.
Well, I don't know if you saw the title of the video this morning. It's called the Ukraine and Russian War with Matty Williams and Sending It. And through my little fanboy messages to yourself, I've got my brother who's like a large mentor of mine, someone I always look up to. And, maybe one day he'll say, I'm proud of you, mate. But he gives me a call randomly while you're doing your thing, your journalism overseas. And he's like, are you tracking your mate? What a bloody legend, all this stuff, hyping you up. And I was like, yeah, he's not that great. But it's so true with everything that you said, and you talk about, a limited timeline, and bloody oath you've got one. But this is the thing. And this is why I'm, I was so proud of you for, and I'm not taking the piss of blowing wind. But, you said what you did, and then you actually did it. And you said that before, walking the walk. But everyone is on a limited timeline, and you're just showing that, if you just go and do something, you can bloody do it. And you're right, people are pretty bloody friendly and supportive, especially when you're doing something that your heart's set on and makes you bloody passionate. And you're obviously bloody passionate. And I think that's why so many people are drawn to what you're doing, mate. Not to mention what you said about mainstream media and stuff, because you're just telling the story as it is. Just so man, I completely agree with everything that you said.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Like that's what I want to show people in I guess in like a sense of what to do is just start doing something. And it's the bit of the man in the arena, because I had I copped some flack of just being like, oh well, you're not good at this. You were just in the right place at the right time. And I was like, but I was in the right place at the right time. And you had to be there to be there. Oh well, you're not actually this, but you were just lucky. And it's like, well, maybe I was lucky, but I also had to travel, 15,000 kilometers across the globe, stay there for 6 weeks to capture something that no one else did. And it's like, I was in the right place at the right time. There was an amount of luck, but that luck will never come if you're just sitting at home or at wherever. So it's a bit of the man in the, you have to be in the arena for things to happen. And and trust me, I'm as lazy as fucking anyone. But at some point, you have to.
I've seen the beard, mate.
Yeah, fucking oath.
Well, just quickly, and I'm probably misquoting, and I can't remember the author. I'm pretty sure it may be Edison, but it says that I always find the harder I work, the luckier I am. So if you're getting lucky, it's probably because of your actions, probably because, and you told me 6 months ago, this is what I'm going to do. So I assumed that there wasn't a day that went by that you weren't thinking about this, thinking about how you do it, how you prepare, etc.
And then all that went out the window. And that's what. And I was like,
this is not how you do it. And you got there and you're like, oh, I could make some more videos, or I could go drink beer and sing karaoke down at the pub.
That was one of the most.
Let's talk about this. So you get to Ukraine. So just quickly, you preempt the invasion. You're right about mainstream media. There wasn't a lot of people on the ground. We weren't hearing a lot of stuff. We still aren't hearing a lot of stuff. You can see it on Instagram better than you can see it on bloody, any news channel. So you preempt the invasion. You land in Ukraine.
So fucking hectic, mate. I land there. Excuse me. I haven't traveled in 4 years or 3 years or whatever, because no one has. And traveling is intimidating. Traveling anywhere is intimidating. Landing in France or Italy is the same.
Yeah.
I land there and instantly I'm like, no one here speaks English. I was like, oh shit. But the two big things that drew me, and people are going to be like, you're a dick, but is one, how lovely everyone was, coming even through customs at the airport. And secondly, how beautiful the women were. The female soldier that put me through immigration, I would have looked like I was smuggling something because I'm just like, passport. Like I was just like, I'm not ready for this after 45 hours of flying. I'm like, oh my God. But everyone's lovely. Like, I get out and people like, you need a taxi. I'm like, and normally like the people at the taxi, like sort of rinks are always ripping you off. And some random dude's like, I'll drive you for like 200 hryvnia, which is like $3.
Yeah.
And he's just like, I'm like, oh, taxi. He's like, no, I'll just drive you if you want. And I'm just in like some random car within like 10 minutes of landing just into Kiev. And it's a shock being somewhere like that. Like Kiev is a struggle, well, Ukraine, but Kiev capital, it is a struggling economy. It does not look like Australia. Like everyone lives in apartment like commie blocks. Like it's run down, it's whatever. And I think it takes a little bit of appreciation to then see the beauty in it. But yeah, it shocked me once I got into like the city center, how like gorgeous it actually is. And how it's just normal. It's just like any other city. And yeah, but it was a shock. It was a shock. One of the biggest things, and anyone who's traveled will understand this, is any sort of Western European country, the alphabet used is the Latin alphabet, what we use A to Z. Once you go Eastern Europe, you step into different Russian alphabet, basically. So at least in like France, you look at a police card and you're like, oh, Polizia. You're like, oh, well, I know what that is. Like you can basically, or you could type the letters, but when you're looking at something and it's just fucking hieroglyphics, you're like, okay, I don't know what, like Kiev is 4 letters, but written in Ukrainian or written in Russian, it's like 8 letters and they're like upside down U's and like backwards fucking Q's. You're like, what is going on here? So that's probably one hard thing to get past. But again, like you will be okay. You'll find your way. And I did. Like I fucked up so much with trains and all it, like, because I'm cheap, using public transport and this and that. And they're just like, but you'll find your way. But it was a shock when I first got there. But I went out for dinner and I quickly realized how cheap it is there and how good the food is. Like,
food is, yeah.
I'm just going to stay here forever. Like, I think my hotel or Airbnb was less than my mortgage is here. I'm like per week. I was like, oh my God.
Well, yeah. you look like you were fucking ready to hunker down, mate, and stay there forever, hitting the piss a fair bit. So, because you, and now you'll have to forgive me. So I can only see what was going up on Instagram when I checked you. But so you were going out, you were doing karaoke. It was bloody hilarious on the stories and stuff. In Ukraine, what was like the thoughts of the people there? Because they're all, celebrating and drinking, and that might just be in the culture. But with the threat of war, what was sort of the thoughts of the population around where you were staying? Because this is something that a lot, like every country has been through war before. What's it like in the prelude?
I think the difference is with Ukraine and most other countries is, yes, every country has been at war. But like say Australia, we've been at war, but Australia hasn't really had war like just in our history just an entire time. Where Ukraine, like look at where Ukraine sits. It's between Russia and Europe. And if it wasn't the fucking Romans and the Vikings, it was the Germans and the Soviets. And it's just been like that the whole time. So they are so used to being and having a constant like conflict or constant danger. But Ukraine's very different when you go like west to east. So like say Kiev's fairly central, like northern. But people in Kiev was sort of like, this is just not going to happen. It'd be like saying Melbourne's going to be invaded by, no, it's just not. But then I moved very quickly. I only stayed in Kiev maybe 4 days in the beginning. And then I moved to Kharkiv, which is where I spent most of my time. You'll hear people pronounce it Kharkov or whatever, but Kharkiv, which is about 20 kilometers from the Russian border. And currently Kharkiv is flattened. Like it's a city of 1.6 million. There's only a few tens of thousands of people left. And it's flat. Like, it is flattened.
I was gonna ask how it's holding up now.
Yeah, I spent a good 3 weeks there, which was a good amount of time to sort of get in. And like day one, I'm like, well, I just want a beer. Like I haven't had a drink yet, so I just went to like some random bar that actually is an old Soviet bunker. You go down these stairs, this old Soviet bunker bar. The funny thing is, I had friends who I met there actually bunkering in that bar in the rocket attacks, which is a massive contrast. But as soon as I walked in, this one girl, Lena, she's like, oh, are you a journalist? I'm like, oh, not really. I'm just sort of here because they recognize as a Westerner like straight away. They're like, this guy's a Westerner. And within day one, man, I met like 10 of the most beautiful people I've ever met in my life. Like that night in like 5 minutes. Drank all night. And then for the next like 3 weeks, we drank like every day at this same bar, which is one of the best things I've ever done. I probably didn't appreciate it at the time because you're with the locals and, you know, there's guys that have been in the army and this and that and everything. And no one thought the invasion was going to happen. Not like everyone was like bullshit. Like they tried in 2014 and they're just not going to do it. And a lot of people are like, oh, none of your stuff aged well. I'm like, well, no, I was just reporting what people thought. And you and me and anyone with any bloody logic, it is so illogical to have invaded Ukraine. Like there is no reason to. Like if you were to do like a pros and cons list, there's like no there's no pros, it's just all cons. So it doesn't make sense to have done it. And in the lead up, no one thought that it was going to happen.
Actually going to do it. Yeah. Based off the publicly available information, right? Doesn't make sense.
No,
just quickly, I do love that people are like, oh, you know, this aged well. You're saying like, hey, no one thinks the invasion's going to happen. What people on the ground actually think, and now, you know, there's people taking the mickey out of you, being like, oh, this aged well. It's so stupid. The world's events cannot be predicted. That's what makes them black swans. That's what makes it exciting and interesting and crazy and unpredictable. Otherwise, we'd all be rich, wouldn't we, if we could predict the future? So
foresight is the hindsight of arseholes.
Oh yeah. So to those people, I say, jog on.
It's just one of those things. But like, it's meeting those people and like no one thought it was going to happen, and then it changed a little bit when I moved to Kramertorsk, which is as far west. Kharkiv's about 20 or 30 kilometers from the Russian border, and I actually went to the Russian border a couple of times. But like to the gate. But and then I went to Kramertorsk, which is famous for being the city or the town on the border of like Donbass. If people have probably heard of Donbass, but it sits above sort of Crimea, and then it sits really on the border of Donetsk, Luhansk, which were the occupied Russian areas that there was fighting for since 2014. And even moved further west again to like a city, Zoloty, which is maybe 300 meters from the fighting in the trenches. And, you know, we were there getting like I still haven't released a lot of videos because we got invaded the next day. It wasn't really relevant. But you're sitting there getting shelled and whatever. But this was before the invasion. And they were the independent states. And that once they got declared independent, it was like, okay, this is on. But I digress. In Kramertorsk, which was previously occupied, like that, Kramertorsk was occupied in 2014. You know, bombed to shit by Grad rockets and then occupied. The people there really thought that the invasion could happen, and where, like Kharkiv, Kiev, people like, fucking shit no, like our army's strong, blah, blah, blah. Never. Kramertorsk, which had been, everyone who living there had been occupied previously, was like, yeah, we think this possibly could happen. Even then, people are like, it's not going to. They'll find some middle ground first. But it did. But yeah.
But it's interesting, hey, like the cognitive dissonance, like someone that's been through this before, 7 years earlier, just still thinking that the likelihood of it occurring again, wasn't going to happen. I'm interested, was there, because, you watched the documentaries made a couple of years ago, even in the lead up to this, maybe like a couple of months out, about the dissonance within the Ukraine society itself, multiple factions, obviously, East and West, and supporters of the pro-Russia, pro-Ukraine. Did you run into any, in this city that was previously occupied, any sort of people that were for pro-Russian government?
Oh, absolutely. So this is one of the things you need to be careful of, going to Ukraine. So in the West, everyone, the more West you go, the more Western they sort of are. Like the more, there's McDonald's and there's whatever, the people tend to have a lot more West sort of culture, but the more East you go, the more Russian it gets. And, where in Kiev, it might be 95%, 95 pro-Ukrainian. In Kramatorsk, in countries like Kramatorsk, cities like Kramatorsk, whatever, it could be 50-50. It is a large pro-Russian faction there, 100%. And you need to be careful of this, especially before that, because it's like, well, you and Westerners typically are very pro-democracy, pro-freedom, whatever. But you need to be careful about what you're saying and what you're doing, because you could really offend someone. who's a pro-Russian there, and there are pro-Russians. There were people that when the invasion was happening were happy that it was happening. Yep, we're going back to the motherland. And a lot of what this is people that lived in, so I'd say there's very, very few, although I talked to a few, but there are younger pro-Russians, there are, but they're probably working off propaganda that was fed to them from, people who lived in the Soviet Union, or there's a lot of people who are older who lived in the Soviet Union and have probably forgotten the horrors of the Soviet Union. But somewhere like Kramertorsk, if anyone knows much about the Soviet Union, is not every town is the same. Not every city is the same. If you have something like important to the state in your town or city, that town or city gets a lot more money, a lot better restaurants and better cars and all this stuff. So a perfect example of this is Pripyat, where famous Chernobyl is. Pripyat had a secret radar facility there and the nuclear station, of course, which was incredibly important to the state and incredibly wealthy. So Pripyat, the city, was one of the richest cities in the whole Soviet Union. And this is why it was such like a jewel in the crown of the Soviet Union. And when Chernobyl went down, that it was like such a big deal because it was, somewhere so beautiful. And Kramatorsk is like that. The massive coal mine there, so important to the Soviet Union. So the town had way better funding for schools and roads and everything. So the people that lived places like that have a very different experience, I guess, of the Soviet Union and communism to maybe a lot of other people in other places because they had the big mine and whatever. And they lived in Ukraine, and Ukraine is not like living in Siberia. So experiences may vary everywhere. So there are people with a very fond memory there.
Yeah, I think that's something that I haven't come across before. That's the first time hearing something like that. Like they're linked into the bloodlines of resources and the money that comes from it. Around the community. So like standard of living is higher, the wage is higher, and also like available work as well. That comes with these resources. It's not just like the physical goals, etc., that people try and look at and strategize. Like why would they invade? But also like the mindsets of people. No, that's super, super interesting.
Yeah. But there is a big, like some bars, like the bar that I went to most of the time, you are not allowed to speak Russian there. So everyone in Ukraine speaks Russian and Ukrainian, like everyone does. Speaks both, and both pretty much in and out. That's why it's so hard going there is you sort of have to learn a little bit of, you'll hear both all the time. But some locations it is like if anyone will speak any Russian, like you get the fuck out. You get kicked out if you spoke any Russian.
Was it proper like were there like racist views? Sorry to keep interrupting. Was there any like racist views, or were they like generally happy living? Because like you look at like somewhere like Malaysia, obviously there's three main groups of people, and they're pretty bloody racist towards each other. Or they get along in sort of harmony, but sort of like hope at night that the war comes to send them back to the motherland.
Yeah, like the whole idea of Ukrainians and Nazis is just like the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. But I think we have to peer through. I think a lot of people, especially countries like Australia, where we're very sensitive toward anything, we see nationalism as racism. Like the nationalism is somewhat right. At least that's what I believe. We see nationalism and as racist, and it's not. Like being proud of your country and whatever is not being racist, and it's sure as shit not being a Nazi. But this is, I guess, the propaganda being felt is that Ukrainians are Nazis and they're racist because they're nationalist. They're not. And yeah, it wasn't like, I guess being like, you're speaking Russian, get out. It was more like, we don't speak Russian here. Like everyone here speaks Ukrainian as well. If you're in this bar, we speak Ukrainian and I think some of the like stuff like that it's not like just out of the blue. It's like this country is threatening to invade and literally kill everyone here. Like if you say fuck them and you live there where they're going to get bombed or you've previously been occupied and bombed, I probably understand it. Like, yeah, it's you probably have a reason. And so that's no more, it's probably less racist than Australia is.
Yeah. That's true. But
I never saw any like actual, like a lot of people asked me about things like, there was videos of, black people getting kicked off trains and stuff during the, like the refugee crisis, and I saw none of that. I would have filmed it and stood up against it if I saw it. But honestly, hand on heart, I saw none of it. But I did call out some of what that was, at least at the border. So Ukraine had a large faction of Afghani refugees come into Ukraine when Kabul fell. Now these poor people went through two sort of war zone refugee crises. But what was happening at the border, say with Poland, was, and it happened to me as well, was you'd have, of course, different staging areas for different passport holders or people in different scenarios. So a lot of these videos came out without context. There would be lines of people or sitting around with people of color doing, or wearing hijabs or whatever, that are separate from a line of, Ukrainians. Now, what I'd say to that is, well, what is extra context in this? Because I was put in a different line as well, because it was, okay, who is a Ukrainian passport holder who's a woman or child? Okay, here. The fuck passport do you have? Like, I'm Australian, and with some other Westerners, you go in this line. And a lot of these refugees were waiting for processing to go into more Western Europe as to be resettled, but they were in Ukraine short term, didn't have a passport. So, okay, well, you need to go in this line because the processing here, and it's just processing different. It's no different than at the airport down the road here. Australian passport holders get beelined through, while an EU passport holder needs to go through a different line. And that's what a lot of it was, look, they're segregating them. No, like not by color, not by whatever. I was segregated as well, and I'm white as fuck. It was just, these people know the paperwork needs to go through to let you through the border. That was it. So a lot of that is, mate, I saw none of it. I honestly, I think they're the most beautiful people I've ever met. Honestly.
Do you think, because obviously, like, it's very wave top, like, news reports, paper news reports, articles and stuff, and if this sort of like stuff's coming out and it's been like, segregation at the border, and you're seeing it on the ground, do you have any like plans to like to combat that quicker? I guess it's just too much. It's too much information. Like, you're seeing this stuff and you're like, oh, well, that's bullshit.
It's a hard one because I want to stay very like apolitical. And as far as for me, the thing that mainstream media has, the only thing they've got is speed on things, because they've got a whole team of people, from someone somewhat on the ground through to 20 other people to pump out shit, where I don't have that. I don't have the ability to do it. And I also feel like it's not, I don't know, I feel like it's sort of not my place to be very like super controversial on it. What I want to do is just show what I'm seeing. And like my border video was just showing what I saw crossing. There has been times I've called out some little things. And if I had, I should say as well, the reason I didn't call that out at the time was I didn't even know that was a thing.
Occurring.
So if I'd had, and I don't have footage of that, of the segregation, because I thought it was no big issue. I was like, oh yeah, whatever. This happens at every border in the world. So I don't even have footage of it. So I don't really want to be just like speculative. If it happened again at the border and I could go and film it and do whatever, I would. So yeah, probably. It's just hard, man, because there's still so many people that just absolutely believe every word that Waleed says, which is, and people need to remember, the same media that told you all about COVID and all this stuff is the same media that's telling you about what's happening in Ukraine. I had an email like 6 days into the invasion off a large media company in Australia going like, hey, what's the situation like? We're thinking of sending someone across. And I'm like, you guys are fucking idiots. I'm like, you're 6 days too late. But it is what it is.
Yeah, super interesting. Super interesting.
But people like me can, we talked offline about this, but there is going to be a wave of people similar to what I'm doing and actually be able to do it. I think with like YouTube advertisements and things like that, like it could be, if you're willing to do the work and you're willing to sell to media, you could make your money back on what you're doing. Not me, because no media will touch me anymore, but like, fuck them. But I burnt every bridge there because like, they're like, we'll give you $80 to do a live cross. I'm like, $80? Like, you want me to go outside during a curfew when we can hear grad launches? No, They're like $80. Pay me 2 zeros on that. Like,
Billy, your life is worth $80, mate. Don't you get bigger than yourself,
or
all
me
right?
being a
$80
smart
is all
ass
you
and
get.
being like, well, you could send your own person over here.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
what's their what does their return flight cost? $4,000? Pay me that and I'll do it.
I think you're right though. Like the decentralization, and I'm sure people will talk about this. Like the decentralization of mainstream media. Like you talk about the silent majority, Donald Trump getting in and stuff, and then you've got Joe Rogan running his own thing, which is massive. Someone like Tucker Carlson's mainstream, but a huge sort of like independent opinion. And then there's like Russell Brand as well. And actually, I think I said to you early on, I thought it was really good, you just sitting down, not outside, risking your life for $80, going through an article that you had seen and just discussing it with your own opinion. And I think people are drawn to that, mate. And I think you're right. I think you will see more of it. And I was sort of hopeful during COVID and stuff, the same way that your sort of like ideas and dreams and like goals, future goals, got motivated by the lack of inaction. Like, how am I going to live my life after this? I want to make sure that I'm doing something important. I actually thought that more people would take your approach, but decidingly noting how popular you are because you are just being yourself and chasing your dreams. Possibly not not many people had the motivation that you did to go out and kick some goals, mate. So again, good on you. And I think you're
there's
right.
Still a little bit of Stockholm syndrome from COVID as well. And I think we will see more people step out and do stuff. I'd like to see more people do it because I think people are a lot more capable than maybe what they think, and I'm included in that. The biggest thing I need to fix in my life coming back from Ukraine is backing myself in it. Like, people might be thinking, you flew to Ukraine by yourself, like you back yourself, but I need to back myself more. Because there was lots of things I was like, I know I should do that, or I know I should film this, or go there, or do this, and I'm like, now, but such as saying no, I won't, and I was like, fuck, I should have done that. Like I should have backed myself, and that's probably a big thing with people, and I'm working on it too. Is just backing yourself in things, and you're way more capable than you think you are, way more.
Yeah, no, definitely, and it's good, mate, because you speak so openly about it. Like, it's the human side of it. You're just a human being. You're as capable physically as anyone else. You've got the same sort of like intellect as anybody else with first world education, etc. It's literally just comes down to mindset. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Now, what everybody probably wants to hear, Willie, is some worries, mate. And I won't take a knee, but I watched that missile fly over your head, and I was actually I was at work at the time, and I checked out social media. I see a missile fly over your head, and that must have been one of the first captured sort of ordnance strikes from Russia to Ukraine.
Well, my opinion is it was one of the first, if not the first. So that morning I opened up my window because it's at 4 a.m. ish. And it seems surreal talking about it. It sounds like I'm bullshitting even in my own head. I'm like, did this actually happen? Open my window. I'm like, say, the 5th floor of an Airbnb. And all I can see is Grad rockets, which are like a multiple launch rocket system. And all I can see is Grad rockets like landing in the distance, just lighting up like a whole area, just peppering. And I'm like, oh my God, like, is that actually what it is? And even then I was like, oh, well, 5th floor, the border is 20 k's. It could just be on, and I'm like, oh, that's close. You're hearing it, that's close. So I went out to like RV with Bryce because we were staying at 2 locations, and our whole thing was like, me and Bryce were independent of each other, but if the invasion happens, we will help each other leave because we're independent journalists. Like, we will help each other do wherever to get out, because people still thought that if Russia invade, it's going to be like balls to the wall, 24 hours and the country's gone. Everyone suggested that. Like, that's what it would be equivalent of mainland Australia invading Tasmania. Like, that's what we thought it would be like. It will be like this, gone. So it was like, we need, if it happens, we need to do what we can and then think about fucking off. And yeah, we're out in the street, whatever, sort of normal morning. And it was like, oh, we should do a live cross. Like, oh, whatever, because Putin had just announced, like, just declared war. And you hear Bryce say in the video, President Putin has just declared war, and literally like 2 seconds after, like, of the missile across, and we're like, holy shit! And we striked on the backside of a building we're actually going to, That actually wasn't the closer missile. Like that was only say 50 meters over our heads. But we had, I'm still not sure what it was. It might have been a grad. I'm not sure. Land within 50 to 100 meters of us. And that was, if you watch the video, maybe a few minutes on from that missile crossing our heads, there was a point I think I say to like Bryce, I'm like, get down or something, and we run into a building. Because I peer through so on the other side of the road, I looked through like in between two buildings, and there was basically just like a red bolt come through, and impact on the other side of the building within 100 meters. And that was actually the close one. That was the one I was like, shit, if that landed not behind that building, that would have probably somewhat fragged us. I'm not sure, depending on what it was. So that was the close, and it was just like that, getting hit with shit like grads, whatever. Those were probably the closest ones, I'm guessing. I'm trying to think back, but yeah, it just was like that. You hear the anti-aircraft guns kick up, you hear whatever. It's like, holy shit, like this is happening. But yeah, and people still believed. People didn't believe it was happening. People thought we were like conspiracy guys who had like photoshopped, and people like getting my messages like, oh, you're paid off by the CIA. And I'm like, I fucking wish I was. Like, it'd help me fund this trip a little bit more. And it took about 3 hours from that first rocket for the mainstream to pick it up. But yeah, it was, the man in the right point at the right time. And we, moved around and then went to like a hotel area where they knew they had an old Soviet bunker, because we didn't know it was coming. And that's when the other media was starting to sort of wake up and, oh, what's going on? You're like, you'd probably want to turn your camera on, homies. They're all there in their blue body armor and shit, talking whatever. Some of them are brilliant. Like, don't get me wrong, there are people in that game who are really good people, like really great. But there's some that just, But yeah, it was just crazy. Same as in Vinitsa when we had the Su-25s, whatever they are, cross, which are like the equivalent to an A-10. And we're, on the ground, like sort of ducking, weaving. Like, the video doesn't do it justice. This is the thing, is like what you capture. It's very rare to capture anything combat-y. It really is. Like I had this illusion that I'd be filming Russian tanks shooting stuff, and people like, even other conflict journalists and videographers, like, no, that doesn't really happen. Like, because to be there is unbelievably dangerous. And if you're filming that, you're not getting out again. Like, you'll have to go back through Russia somewhere.
It's like it's like a stay behind OP. Like, you just, you just don't do it unless you're willing to,
Well, they're like, we used to get that footage in Afghanistan, but we were with the Marines and their tanks, and the force was, our force was 100 to 1. So you could film a Abrams shooting because you're fighting, some guys in sandals in a village, from the greatest superpower in the world, being the American Army, where this isn't that. So it's like, no. And there are people that have some incredible footage, but that was my expectation, was I was going to be there filming Russians come in, and it became, well, they're targeting journalists. Like, they are shooting people with press patches on. And it's like, well, and this is why there's been most of the footage, 99% of it is of iPhones and people in the right place. But yeah, like the anti-aircraft, we were there, and that day, the SU, whatever it was, it's called a frog foot. It's an A-10. Got shot down, the guy ejected, and then there was like 8 more of them fly over us, at the middle of the night. They weren't dropping ordnance on us. They were dropping ordnance near, but they were crossing back from maybe Dnipro or somewhere. Not really sure, but they were just crossing over us and just air raid. But then all the anti-aircraft kicked up to shoot them. But it was just hectic. It was a very different war. And there's a lot of people with a lot of opinions who, and a lot of guys equivalent, who are like, I'm going to come over and fight. I'm like, just have a real think, because the wars I've been involved in previously have been from the coalition versus untrained guys in the Middle East, not against another superpower. Like, be very careful of what your brain is getting as propaganda too.
100%. Yeah. Peer-to-peer, proper peer-to-peer, and then almost like the Ukrainians acting as like an insurgency force, defending their motherland as they would. 100% they would.
And we haven't seen peer-to-peer war since World War II. We have not seen that. People say we haven't really, not proper.
Just quickly, I want to get on like your transportation methods. Like you're pretty much on foot, so I'd like to hear about how you went about that. But just quickly, what do you think? So Ukrainians, like, their culture and their nationalism and their pride, people talk about the relevance of infantry, and then the older people always say, there's a requirement for infantry to, hold ground. But a full Ukrainian population, like Russia must know, or at least think, that there's no way to actually take these places because there'll still be resistance in the population unless they level the whole country.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think, and this is speculative, but I think Russia had a bit more idea that they would be welcomed with open arms.
Yeah.
And it's the exact fucking opposite of that. Now, yeah, and this is the thing of, like, we don't know where this ends. Does this end in Russia having to kill every single fighting age male in the country? Is that where it ends? Because if you ask me, these guys are that nationalist that, well, not that that much of, like, this is our country. You do not fucking come here. Not only the men, everyone, that if you were to take Ukraine to be Russia, you'd have to kill every single person in the country. It would be a genocide of Ukrainians. It would have to be to do that, because they would never surrender. So that's something that's, I guess, concerning. But it's a hard one to speak on big movements. I think we have seen the end of armor. If you ask me, and this is just completely my opinion,
dead set,
that armor will never be and I think we should maybe rethink maybe some purchases the military has done recently of billions of dollars worth of armor, because you have some untrained but low-trained Ukrainian farmer with an M-Law kill a $5 million T90 with an M-Law. Like, it's one of those things. And people, the Russian tactics. Well, I don't care about the tactics. If we're killing complete convoys of tanks with a cheap Bayraktar drone or NLAWs or whatever, we need to rethink about how this works. It's insane. But
100%. Just quickly, like on Russian tactics, blitzkrieg and strong use of firepower and speed and tempo, they're all of Western society's tactics as well. Like throw everything at it.
But it's a hard one, and I don't want to get too speculative because I'm not a military bloody commander who knows exactly how to invade anything. But
you do look like Rommel.
Yeah, but the actual firepower delivered in the initial days of the war was not what everyone expected.
Yep.
So America, and I talked about this in a video, but America in the initial invasion of Iraq fired like 900 cruise missiles in like the first hour, where 2 weeks in is when Russia hit that same number. And it was like, this is the concern, is why are they holding back? Like, Russia have the ability to fire 10,000 of them if they wanted from the Black Sea in. That's where most of the cruise missiles are from Navy ships in the Black Sea. Anyway, it's like, why was it sort of so under, and why were they using their old equipment and older older technology, older equipment, and their untrained, lower trained conscript guys, at least in the initial break-in? Now, whether it's tactic, whether it's just the way Russia is and we've just greatly overestimated it, we don't know. That's something, I guess, to speculate on. But it's a difficult one, and I think we're starting to see more and more of that tech which we expected to see start coming, things like thermobaric weapons. But in the initial invasion, it was, well, did we tie Putin's hands where he went, well, I never wanted to invade, but now I have to because no one's backing off this. Okay, we're going to be welcomed with open arms. Let's roll in with our first sort of line of stuff, not our, like, everything. But I don't know. It may just be the West has overestimated Russia's power tenfold. And this is something that's given me a bit of confidence, and I think it should give everyone in the military confidence. Was we always had, at least me, this idea that if China invaded Australia, they would just roll us in a day. And I'm like, well, the Ukrainian military's power is less than Australia's, as far as technology at least. And Russia and China are very similar in sort of weaponry and power. And Russia is not having success invading Ukraine, which shares a land border with them and speak the same language, and there's pro-Russian military groups within Ukraine. China's going to have no fucking hope trying to sail across 4,000
Yeah.
kilometers of ocean to get to us, a country which is not NATO, but we're NATO aligned, coalition backed. My concern of that happening is gone. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
try us. But it's a hard one, man. It's a weird one of what's happening. The biggest thing I'll tell people of that is do not believe the numbers coming out about Russians killed and Ukrainians killed, because the numbers coming through are completely fabricated, like fucking completely on both sides. So the Russians' dead is greatly overnumbered. You know, like people will say, oh, it's 60,000, when it's more like, say, 20 or 30. And I'm sort of out of the loop at least 4 or 5 days now. But it was greatly overestimated. Where same as, I can't remember the numbers now, but I'll pull some out. But it's sort of like in that video I did about Russian aircraft being shot down, where they said, oh, we'd shot down like 80 aircraft, but there was only like 13 that could actually be verified shot down, things like that. We had, and I haven't talked about this before, but they're near Lviv, which is like the far western city. There was a ex-NATO base there, NATO training area for Ukrainians that had some Western and Ukrainian soldiers there, no one NATO, but it got bombed. It got hit by Russian missiles. And the reporting was like 28 guys were killed or something. And I was speaking to a guy the day after, and he was like, he literally laughed at me. He's like, no. It was more like 140. So, you know, they've fabricated the number of 1/6 of what it was. Now, I'm not saying to use 1/6 as everything, but like Ukraine especially, and whether it's a tactic of to keep the morale of their people, morale of their soldiers, whatever, is greatly underreporting numbers of deaths and equipment lost and ground lost. Like, look at the maps that like Atlas put up of the ground being taken, and you're like, well, there's still like Russia's taking a lot of ground and has the ability to do it. At the end of the day, you've got a country of 40 million against one of 170 million, and the one of 170 million is prepared to deploy every single person who can fucking walk.
Yeah.
And we've seen that. So where this goes, I don't know. But there's some absolute bloodbaths that have happened, and, you know, Russia losing 400-500 guys a day. And you have to feel for these guys. These, you know, we don't choose the wars. Like, soldiers don't choose a war. They just do their job. And something that's even different again is these young soldiers who have been filled with propaganda too. So, you know, we don't really understand government propaganda in Australia to the degree of somewhere like that, because we still have, people will say the government's propaganda or whatever, but we still have access to free media on all sides. Like, you could look up how to be a flat earther or COVID, like anti-vax. You know, we still have access to this information. It's not limited. It might be limited through mainstream, but it's not limited online. People understand that in Russia, well, you're limited to see anything online too. So if they fill these young guys' heads with they're killing Nazis, well, we're doing the right thing. So, you know, you can't really hold it all on the soldiers. Like, yeah, blame the generals, blame Putin, blame the officers. I'm good at blaming officers for shit, but like those young lads who had their head filled with propaganda, were told they were going on a fucking exercise with like just a live fire X. Next thing, they copping 20 mil in the front mantle of a tank and getting burnt alive inside of a bloody cooked off tank. You know, that's horrific. And there's
Absolutely
400 or 500 guys a day. Those are the numbers, World War II sort of numbers. It's shocking, man, on both sides. And they're brothers. Like, Ukraine and Russia were the same country 31 years ago. They were the same country. They are brothers and sisters. And people, every single person I met in Ukraine had family or friends or whatever on the Russian side. It's no further distance. It's less distance than Sydney to Victoria. Way less. Like, say, Kharkiv, where I spent my time, 20 kilometers to the border and 80 kilometers to like the next city. And most of them had friends there. This is why it's so horrific, is it's not enemies of the people and not enemies of each other. It's horrific, mate. And like a lot of my friends who have lost everything, and this was probably the hardest thing on me, was seeing good friends of mine, like, you know, friends for a month, like some of my best friends in the world lose everything. The guys stay behind, and their girlfriends and my girlfriends cross the border with nothing, like absolutely nothing. At least 3 of my friends have lost their homes, like at least 3. And the guys are fighting, and it's horrific. And one of my good friends, Lena, who I actually met on the morning of the invasion, she was at this hotel, and she's like, "What would you do to get out?" I'm like, "Fuck, like just go west." And we become good friends. She was living with her dad in Donetsk in 2014, and when Donetsk was occupied and sort of invaded by the Russians, then she lost her home then, and her dad had to stay behind. And she went to Ukraine because he had to stay behind and fight. And so she hasn't seen him since then. And then she was living in Ukraine, and now has escaped to Poland, and her house has been blown up again. She's lost everything twice. And her dad's still now who was in sort of independent Russia, Ukraine. Now he's in complete Russia. Like, and there's a million stories. Well, there's 40 million stories of that. Yeah. But it's shit like that. And I caught up with her actually in Poland. As she's fucking on Instagram, she's running a full refugee fashion show, because of course she got out with nothing. Like, she didn't have her passport. She had the clothes she was wearing and nothing else. And so she's going to like refugee centers to get clothes and food and shit, and doing like a full like review of everything. In like a comedy routine, but she's really good. She's fucking fantastic person. Same with Yulia, who people probably saw. I put up for a couple of days in Poland. Who I'd met in Ukraine, like, lost everything, had to leave her brother and dad behind because, well, they're not allowed to leave. They've got to fight. Lost her home, lost everything, and got out with, and all she managed to cross the border with was really herself and she's a singer by trade, and her microphone and like amplifier. And like, well, I had to bring this instead of clothes or anything because the only way to make money is this. Because of course the Ukrainian hryvnia is worth nothing. The economy, like, it's worth nothing. So if you have 100,000 hryvnia in your bank, it's worth nothing in any other. Like, no one's going to convert it. So they've got no money, no anything, and they into Europe somewhere. And it's like, holy shit. And the young women and children, and you're like, holy shit. And don't speak the language. Like, Yulia had, Ukraine is a poorer country. She'd never left Ukraine. It's the first time in the European Union. She's like, I don't have the money. I don't speak the language. And holy shit, like going to pubs to offer to sing for any amount of money. It's like, fuck. Just crazy, man. And seeing that was probably the hardest thing. Like, the combat stuff, whatever, but seeing that happen to your friends is a very hard. And these friends who were living in a European, like Kharkiv, man, and places like that are beautiful European cities. Like stunning Europe, like as European as like Warsaw or Krakow or Paris, honestly. And people living there and just now flattened. And places they're sending me. If you saw that photo of me standing in front of that government building, and I was like, this was me 3 days ago, and this is, and it's just gone. Shit like that. It's like, and fuck, if I think it's difficult on myself, imagine what they're going through. If that's their home, their dad and brother are still there.
Fighting. Yeah, man. Yeah, it's crazy because I think I watched your video. It's got over. It's almost got 2 million views now, if not more than 2 million views of you on the border. And this is very far away from the conflict, or actually probably not. I'm unsure. You'd have to verify how far away it was from the conflict. But I think the reason why that video's got so many views is because conflict is conflict, and unfortunately, very unfortunately, those that are left behind or killed because of that conflict, that's where their story ends. And there's no, unfortunately, like you said, a lot of the time they're operating off propaganda as to why they want to join the conflict. But those left behind, it's like a concentration of, resilience and people making the best of what they can. And those stories, mate, like, good on you for telling those stories, because, in Western society, in countries like ours in Australia, I think that's why so many people flock to yourself, because you're making the best out of a bad situation. But in wartime, for these people affected, they all have to make the best of a bad situation. It's like why there's so many books about World War II, especially with the Jews, because they tried their absolute best to make horrific events meaningful and to get through it. And people flock to those stories, mate. So I hope whatever you do in the future, you continue to tell those stories, because there's so much power in seeing something like that. Where the singer's taken only a microphone. Remember what's important in life. And so I thank you, because I think a lot of people who watch what you have done and watch the people that you've reported on will possibly critically reassess what they're doing with their lives and remember what's important, and whether that translates into just a kiss to their mum or their sister and brother, or appreciation of the food they've got on the table. Like I think that you're having that effect, mate.
That's a really good thing. I'm just doing my thing, but if people get more than just I don't want to say entertainment, but more than just information out of it, that's brilliant. And that I think it's important. People, Australia, the best part about Australia is being so sort of far away from everything else, but it's also a very bad part about, I think, Australia. And luckily we're an incredibly multicultural country, but we don't have that much experience with going to poorer countries and this, unless you do it. And that's why I think travel to places you may not normally is so important, to get a bit of not everyone lives in, Melbourne or Sydney and drinks coffee down at the cafe and pays $8 for a coffee and can afford to do it. Like, it's important to get a bit of a kick up the arse and be like, this is what other people are going through.
It's that perspective, right? It's a perspective. The same way I advocate reading books, just get that perspective in you. Yours is obviously travel
and filming. This is what I want to do. And, and I want to do it myself and things, because I've had offers. Of course, I've had some job offers, but everything comes with some level of it's not yours anymore. And this is what I want to continue doing, is just doing it myself on my own pace and tempo. And I think I'm critical and hard enough on myself to maintain a tempo of like uploading and editing. So it's like, well, I'll actually be able to, I hope, keep it up. Like, of course, if it went to something where I could completely support myself full-time doing it, I would look at making some choices and to just make it easier on myself. Like, even if it was just someone doing some logistics for me or whatever. But I've sort of seen that, well, yeah, this could actually be something I do for a gig, maybe. And even if it's not, then, I'll work in Australia for a few months and then I will, save the money to go and do different zones like this. And it won't only be war. Like, I want to do a lot of crisis. And I've had a lot of people reach out who have been like, well, people don't report on what's going in like PNG. Come over. Because I had some people, and it's just ridiculous enough, call it out being like, oh, you're only doing it because it's a white person's war. It's like, no, this is just the first one I've gone to. I'll go to any war. I'll go anywhere to do refugees or crisis or whatever. It's just the first. I just had to do one, and this is just the one that was available. So it will be. I'm hoping it'll be something, and there's a little bit of me that thinks that a lot of my footage will actually become more relevant in the future, because all my stuff was filming the final days of those towns and cities. There's a video I put up. It's probably my most boring one. In Kramertorsk, basically just walking around. Little did I know that it was in the afternoon, say 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and 4 a.m. the next day was in the invasion, and Kramertorsk now would be leveled. It would be gone, basically off the map, I believe. So I think that some of that will maybe become more relevant as we move forward, being like, this is what it was. It might be 50 years until it's like, well, this was Ukraine before whatever. Like, yeah. But it's a hard one. It's something that I'm fairly proud of. There's a lot of stuff I wish I'd got and wish I did differently, but it was the first time doing it, mate. Like, I'd never done, and a lot of people be like, oh, you fucked up this or fucked it. And I'm like, bro, I've never, like, this was dipping my toe in the water of this world into jumping in the deep end to the biggest conflict we've seen since World War II. Like, I've never done this. I'm not a journalist. I'm not trained. I'm just doing the best I can. I'm like,
yeah, right. And it's all relative as well. Like, mate, the experience that you've had, like, there might be journalists out there that, 10, 20 years experience have never done something like this. It's like a career in the military. You could stay in 20 years and not get in a gunfight, or you could be in 6 months and get in a get in a bloody gunfight. And, you probably get paid out there as well. Like, oh, you idiot, you dropped your magazine. You had bloody 20 stoppages. That's every other bloke you see when you come back that wasn't in the gunfight. It's like, yeah, well, I was there, though. I might have dropped the magazine, but don't listen to what Smithy says. I was bloody there. So you were bloody there, mate. Yeah. So, and this experience, it's only going to grow the crap out of you, mate. It's, and I'm excited to see it, to be bloody honest with you. I'm excited to see it because it's not as if you don't grow exponentially post this event. There's no bloody way. You can't, right? You're never going to go backwards.
Even just human growth, mate. Like myself, like I think a lot of experiences you should look for in life and cherish are the ones where it changes who you are and changes your sort of outlook on life. They're the experiences, and especially with travel, that really change everything. That's what you should be looking for. And I came back a different person with different views on a lot of stuff than what I left. Because, it was such an experience to a different world. Not better or not worse. It's definitely better to see and go through that and experience how different people live. So if anything, even if, nothing comes of making content or whatever, it's grown the way I look at the world. And the way, I think a bit of like human, like you see when you see the worst in humans, Putin invading a democratic country, you see the best in humans too. And the people I'd met through, becoming basically moving out with the refugees, the people fighting, and then the Westerners who have moved into like the NGOs to do whatever, because I stayed at some safe houses and whatever. You see the best in people too, and that's something that's rare to. It is rare to see the absolute best in humanity, on a large scale. So that was something incredible to see, and it's in the worst situation possible.
Oh, so I've got a few questions now, just from people that knew that I'd be speaking to you today, from the page, and they're not so much war based, but they're more advice based with your life, like moving forward from here, Willie. Like, after you fight, and you've just said it, like to go out and travel and stuff. But now, what do you feel is like sort of guiding your decision making for future choices that you make? I would assume, and something that I try and do is if something scares me, if something scares the shit out of me, firstly, I want to bloody learn about it. And I always say knowledge dispels fear. But the next thing that I want to do is actually do it, because I think a lot of people in their life, they'll get frightened of something. And it might be something that their heart is, I say heart like I'm spiritual, but their heart is drawing them towards. But they never do. And you live with that regret. You now, having done something as extreme as this, albeit, yes, maybe you didn't know, but you had a pretty bloody good idea that that's what you were stepping into. How do you make decisions now moving forward into the future?
It's a really good question. It's a very hard one to answer. I think a lot of it will just be like, what is the experience and what like people can I meet and tell the stories of, because I'm interested in people. I'm not interested in like just making clickbaity story stuff. Like it's people I'm interested in. This is where I'm trying, like say on social media, reply to everyone and have some level of like actual connection with people, because that's what I'm interested in. And I think to answer the question of like, how do you make that decision? It's hard and it's very personal, person to person. But I think it almost links back to like, do things that will make you and grow you as a person. And even if that thing scares you, like, if for some people jumping out of a plane is the most scary thing in the world, but you will be a better person after that. Same as public speaking. If you can get up and talk about something and that scares the shit out of you, well, the benefits of it far outweigh the sort of scariness it might be. So I guess it's be prepared and be willing to be the man in the arena. Be prepared to put you in the situation where things can go wrong, and they can. But it's where you have to be if you want that to happen. And it's like you said previously, the harder you work, the better luck you tend to have. Yeah. And I honestly, like, I'm not religious and not spiritual or anything, but I do really believe in the more you care for your sort of fellow man, the more people will care for you. I had just as many people, like Ukrainian friends, reach out to me and be like, "Oh, you going all right?" Blah blah. I'm like, "Fucking Jesus Christ! Why are you reaching to me?" But yeah, but it also doesn't need to be anything spectacular. I think about like what people remember of what they saw of mine is very different to what I hold important and true to what happened to me in Ukraine. So, you might think what you're looking for and experience is something big and spectacular and the rocket flying over your head and blah, 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 on the equivalent of that, or, kissing someone in front of the Eiffel Tower. But it's not. It's not that. The things you will hold dear after that is like intimate personal connections with people. That's what you'll actually hold dearest. If I look back at my Ukraine trip in my mind and think, what were the most important moments in this? The two most important moments were joking around with these little girls who were escaping as refugees and making faces at each other and fucking around, and meeting a mum and dad on a train whose son was fighting in the war, and them like just speaking at me in Russian, but hugging me and kissing me and, showing me their cat in their house. And it's moments like, and there's multiple of those, but there's moments like that, which are your most important ones. So it doesn't need to be some spectacular on Instagram, Facebook, whatever, but what you'll actually hold dear is the things you don't think you'll ever. So same as like when I went to Paris and whatever on other trips, is your most important connections from that are not seeing the Eiffel Tower or not going to the Moulin Rouge or whatever. It's small personal connections with people that you can't ever have with anyone else, or no one else will have. That's what's important. And putting yourself in situations where that can happen, at least for me, human to human stuff is what it is. And I think in wartime like that is where, at least, or not just in wartime, but in places like that, that's where you have those biggest connections.
That is a brilliant answer, mate. You've almost made me tear up. What I want to say, though, is just quickly, mate, every day now, and now that you're home as well, are you still able to have a moment like that just in your day-to-day when you wake up in Australia? You got Lily, you got your family.
And the chilies.
Yeah.
You're absolutely able to have that. Absolutely you are. And that's sort of why I link to that. Don't think you need to do something big and grand and spectacular. It can happen at the shops. It can happen anywhere. But I think there's a lot more of that in somewhere where everything is stripped back. You're crossing the border with a backpack on and that's your entire life and everything's stripped back. You probably have more of it, but same as in your life, everyone has this, that the most important things they really have are little moments like that. Like everyone will remember, like when you're a kid and you've got like an older cousin or something you just think is the fucking coolest dude in the world. And it's connections like that truly are very important to people.
Yeah, and stick with them for years to come. Like I always say, a lot of people can't remember their whole wedding day, but they can remember, conversations that they've had with good mates over beers, and that's possible every day. You don't need to spend $40,000 on it, mate. That's a bloody good answer.
Same with your wedding day, though. Like if you looked back at the most important moments with your wife, it's probably not your wedding day. It's probably right. Remember when we did something silly or whatever happened, like something like that. Like that's probably more important. And that's, again, it doesn't need to be some grand big thing to have those moments. You just need to put yourself in situations and be open to having them as well.
Open to having them. Yeah, no, that's, mate, that's, I'm trying not to, I always try not to fanboy on these interviews, but like I listen to you, I listen to like Holly McKay talk about, Syria, and she said the exact same thing about the ISIS invasion. It was the people on the ground that made it worth it, etc. So I think you both are doing bloody incredible things. Mate, I might bloody put a fork in it there for this conversation, because I don't think we can move forward past that. I just want to say, for everybody, obviously this podcast is pretty new, and if you're following me, you're probably following Matty's good-looking face, because I do make some memes about him, or some of the soldiers send in memes about him that I could not post. But check out Willy Beating Cancer's YouTube, because I'm sure that he's going to continue to tell these stories. And now that he actually has some experience, hopefully the videos will be bloody better than what they've been. That's a piss take at the people giving shit to Willy online. Like they can do any better.
I love it.
The bastards, bro.
The audacity to be sitting in Australia and be like, your video sucks. Be like someone was like, it's a bit shaky. I'm like, bro. like the one of the airfield I went to in Lviv, where we had to get a fucking literally public transport and some random ambulance to get there. And he's like, it's a bit shaky. I'm like, we just had 7 rockets hit and it's a bit shaky. I'm like, fuck off.
Oh man, but I can't thank you enough, mate. I hope a lot of people listen to this or watch this, and I think they'll get a lot out of it, mate. Not only you setting your mind to something and just doing it, but your advice as well. The man in the arena, 100%. And it's not about being in a war zone or being in a part of time that might make history or an environment to do that. It's about the small connections that are like available every day. But if you want to go and chase your dreams, and this is why I respect the hell out of you, just go and do it. Like what have you got to lose? What have you got to lose? And I think regret kills a lot of people. And you say you're on a limited time frame because of your diagnosis, but we truly all are. We truly all are. And yeah, mate, it's been great to talk to you today. I'm going to be on a high all day after this conversation.
Oh, good. No, it was brilliant to come on. I'm glad we finally kicked it out, and it was better now than it would have been if we did it before I went away.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. The beard's grown. You've seen bloody war, and I'm sure that we will speak more in the future, mate. And I know that we'll speak on a personal level, but the next time you have some big event, you're welcome back anytime, mate.
Someone's got to make your content, mate.
Well, I know you've been making a heap. I know you've been making a heap of bloody other people's content with everything that you've captured, dude.
Yeah, is what it is.
All right. I'll stop it there.
Easy, bro.
For everybody, feel free to make sure you leave a rating if you enjoyed this conversation with Willy, but also go check out Willy's YouTube. I'll throw it all over the Instagram page. It's already there. But yeah, thanks for listening to Buzz and Books podcast episode 3 with Matty Williams, OAM, His Excellency, Sir. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.